Okay, so here now, we're going to relate degrees and radians. Remember, radians we did in the last video, and degrees we did before that. Both of them are units of measurement for angles. And yes, they are related. We can go from degrees to radians and vice versa. And it's because of this equality, which the textbook actually shows, so I'll let you read that on your own. But it turns out that 180 degrees is the same as pi radians. And from here, what we get is 1 degree is pi over 180 radians. You just basically divide both sides by 180. Whereas here, if we were to divide by pi, we get 1 radian is 180 over pi degrees. So this is how we convert between radians and degrees. The formula itself, that is this equation, is really not hard to see why it's true. It's really just based on the circumference of a circle and remembering what a radian is by definition. Also, I should say this. Generally, we don't write down the word radians. People generally just don't do that. Degrees, they do. But when an angle is in radians, generally people don't write out the word radians. If you have an angle in radians, they won't write out the word radians. And you'll see, though, I'm going to do some examples here, but really in the long run, if you want to convert from degrees to radians, really you're just going to end up multiplying by pi over 180. And to go from radians to degrees, really in the end, you're just going to multiply by 180 over pi. Although when your answer's in degrees, you do want to write out the degree symbol because your answer's in degrees. So as an example of this, 90 degrees, right? Well, this is the same as 90 times 1 degree, but 1 degree as above is 90 times pi over 180 radians, okay? Here, since we're first seeing this, I'll write out the word radians. Even though, again, people generally don't write out the word radians when the angle's in radians. So we have 90 times pi over 180, which again is 90 times pi over 180 radians. But 180 is 90 times 2. So this is the same thing as 90 pi over 90 times 2 radians. And I'll take care of that later. And this is the same as these cancel. We get pi over 2 radians. Okay. I just wrote out the word radians, I guess, just because we're seeing this for the first time. But from now on, I'm not going to write out the word radians if the angle's in radians. So what I crossed out there was 270 degrees. So let me do that here. But it's really the same idea. So this is, again, 270 times 1 degree. And that is the same as 270 times pi over 180 radians. And of course, this is the same as 270 times pi over 180. Okay, but again, we want to simplify this. Well, 270 is the same as 90 times 3. See if I can fit it. 180 is 90 times 2. So the 90s cancel, and we get 3 pi over 2. Okay, so we did those examples. Now let's do these. So we have 2 pi over 3. Again, this is really the same thing as 2 pi over 3 radians. Okay? And this is, of course, 2 pi over 3 times 1 radian. And from the previous slide, we saw that this is the same as 2 pi over 3 times 180 over pi degrees. And just like above, we want to simplify this a bit. So what we're going to get is 2 pi over 3. I'll take care of this one later. 2 pi over 3 times, 2 pi over 3 times, let me just erase this, 180 over pi degrees. And of course, we have cancellation. For instance, the pi's cancel. 2 times 180 over 3, that's 360 over 3. And this is again in degrees. Well, 360 over 3 turns out to be 120. So we have 120 degrees. And for the other one, let me do this, 5 pi over 6. So same idea, 5 pi over 6. Again, this is 5 pi over 6. This is in radians, so we have 1 radian here. Just like above, 1 radian is 180 degrees, 180 over pi degrees, excuse me. So this becomes, the pi, you get 5 pi. Let's see, I'm running out of room, so let me go on to the next slide. So again, we have 5 pi, 180 over 6 pi. This is all degrees. Okay? So the pi's cancel. 180 over 6, so that's equal to, 180 is the same as 30 times 6. This is over 6 degrees. So 6 is cancel. We have 5 times 30, which is 150 degrees. Now, if you really notice, what did we just do in the long run? Well, in the long run, we just multiplied by 180 over pi. That's all we did. Same thing up here. We just multiplied by 180 over pi when we converted from radians to degrees. To go the other way, from degrees to radians, okay, we just multiplied by pi over 180. That's all we did. That's why we have these conversion formulas that I mentioned before. That to go from degrees to radians, you're just going to multiply by pi over 180. To go from the radians to degrees, you're multiplying by 180 over pi. Okay. So that's why we did what we did.